You are listening to the Bat Flip Podcast, a baseball podcast from Belly Up Sports and the Belly Up Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Damian and Matt.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Bat Flip Podcast. My name is Damian here with my co-host Matt. We are coming to you on November 4th, of 2021. A week after we recorded the last episode, we were going into Atlanta with it being a 1-1 series and looking at what Atlanta could do. Had a couple bullpen games and everything. So we'll wrap up what the World Series what happened in the World Series. But before we get to all of that, we have some small little moves happened since the season has ended. We'll go ahead and jump on with the first one of the Brewers signing reliever Trevor Gott to a major league deal.
Yeah, so Trevor Gott is a guy who I don't think pitched in the majors this year. I think I read that he was in the minor leagues when he pitched this year, but he's a guy who, he's been around for a few years. Um, yeah, his last innings in the major leagues were in 2020. Um, this year he pitched in 41 and a 2/3 innings in AAA. Pitched really well in those innings. To a 386 FIP. He has a really good strikeout rate. Um, in the past, he spent time with Washington. In the big leagues, he spent time with Washington, the Los Angeles Angels, and San Francisco. Had a pretty good peripherals in 2019. But this just seems to me like a major league minimum signing of a guy who, you're kind of looking at possibly, um, you're kind of looking at possibly to to maybe be a guy where you like his stuff, like whatever for whatever reason, like his spin rates or his velocity or something, and you feel like you might be able to fix a little bit. So definitely a low risk signing, and we'll see how he does with the Brewers.
Yeah, and the Milwaukee's one of those teams that kind of just always find some bullpen pieces out of nowhere. So maybe they see something in Gott and that they can turn into a serviceable major league reliever. But we'll go ahead and jump on to the next part we had, which was a little bit of a bigger move. Kind of surprised me a little bit. But Tucker Barnhart got traded from the Cincinnati Reds to the Detroit Tigers.
Yeah, I like this move for Detroit. It's a really good catcher, a great defensive catcher that they were able to bring in as a guy to kind of help that pitching staff, the young pitchers, and Casey Mize, Tariq Skubal, Matt Manning, and others, help them kind of learn their way at the big league level. He's a really good game caller. He's a veteran catcher, been around for a long time. He's put up pretty decent defensive numbers, through the last 3 years. And you've got the Cincinnati Reds have Tyler Stevenson waiting in the wings, so it was definitely worth the trade for the Tigers, who look like they might try to go make some moves to improve their big league club this offseason. So this would be the first of those moves right here.
Yeah, and it didn't cost too much. The Tigers traded a 24-year-old prospect by the name of Nick Quintana. Has never played above single A, and this year hit 196 with a 329 on base. So maybe they, kind of a depth piece. Maybe they can see that they could find something in him. But for a catcher with a, I think he had like a $7.5 million option. It's, you're not going to get much for him anyways. So
Yeah.
But let's talk about the biggest move that's happened. At least this one actually happened before the season even ended, before the World Series, I should say, ended. And that's that the San Diego Padres hired their manager, hiring Oakland A's manager Bob Melvin.
This is a really interesting move. Bob Melvin was the manager at Oakland from 2011 to 2021. Led them to a lot of really big time, to a lot of really big time seasons, especially when you compare the amount of talent on their roster to the results that they got. Did a great job there. Previously to that, he had been the manager of the Arizona Diamondbacks from 05 to 09 and the Seattle Mariners in 03 and 04. Um, and this is a really interesting move that it sounds like basically Bob Melvin was that the A's just weren't really willing to pay him what he was going to make there. I believe he had an option. He may have it may have just been a mutual, I'm gonna, we don't really want to pay you anymore, and okay, well, I'm easily gonna find another job, so I'll leave type thing. But um, this was a really this is a really interesting move. And for San Diego, you get a guy who's a veteran manager who's been through the grind and has led teams to success. And I think that one thing that is missing from the Padres has been kind of that leader and that voice, um, that veteran voice and presence in the clubhouse that Bob Melvin can bring.
Well, and with Bob Melvin as well. So talking back to the A's thing, they're going pretty much into a rebuild. And there had been talks, like you said, he had an option and kind of a thing that he wanted to, be on a winning team, and the Oakland respects him so much. I mean, he's the all-time. I think he's the all-time leading manager in wins for a manager with the organization. So it's kind of a good faith thing. They want to bring in a younger guy to help with the rebuild that way. And for the Padres, I mean, this is a great hire. Melvin is, I mean, he's got to be one of the at least top 10 managers, if not top 5 managers in baseball. And he's done a lot in Oakland with less talent than he's going to come in with San Diego. And San Diego has always tried to get those, as of late, they've tried to get those managers that are, the younger guys that don't have managing experience, and that hasn't really worked out. Jace Tingler was pretty decent, but he started losing the clubhouse kind of right at the end as they weren't really fulfilling their potential. So Melvin is a big hire for the Padres that will, get everything that this team has talent wise out of it for sure.
Yeah, and you mentioned the way that Jace Tingler lost that clubhouse. To be honest, that is the most important thing for a Major League Baseball manager, is that the ability to bring the clubhouse together, because you know uh, you can bring in different pitchers and different times and construct your lineup in different ways, but you're in a grind of 162 games plus potentially the postseason when you're talking about a team like the Padres with the talent they have. And when you play that many games, it's really easy to slack off at times, or to have a rough stretch where your team is just not really gelling well. And sometimes having that manager, that presence, really helps with that. And that's just something that it seems like some of these younger managers aren't able to manage a clubhouse more so than aren't able to manage a roster, or manage the lineups, or the everyone's talking about all the analytics of the managers. And really, analytics are something that you can use to make decisions, but as a manager, you know you could be a great manager and not even know what you're doing when it comes to that, and have someone just radio you the analytics and of who to put in the game. It's one of those things where it's so much about putting the correct pieces, or putting the clubhouse together, and having everybody upbeat, believing in each other all year, and getting along. And that's something that does not seem to have been the case with the Padres. And that's why a team with the talent that they had can completely fall apart in a season like this year was.
Yeah, they were a team, just from watching them all year long. They're a team that early in the season they had a lot of confidence and they were doing really well. And they hit one of those rough stretches, and then it kind of seemed like they started turning on each other a little bit. We've even seen Machado and Tatis get into it in the dugout, yelling at each other, saying it's not all about you, it's not all about you. So it definitely was a team that struggled with that yet camaraderie throughout a season. When you hit those rough patches for sure. But great hire for the Padres getting Bob Melvin. It was a move that it wasn't even rumored at all. It came kind of out of nowhere, but it's a great hire for AJ Preller for sure.
Absolutely.
But let's go ahead and we'll jump over to the World Series. I know you really want to talk about this because your Atlanta Braves ended up winning the World Series this year.
Yeah, it was super exciting. Huge deal for for so many people. The first thing is that um, just the kind of the relief of the Braves winning, because the drought that they had wasn't like a historic drought. It wasn't like the Cubs 108 years, or the Red Sox 80 plus years, or the White Sox, that kind of drought. But the fact that they had been there so many times in the World Series, or in the playoffs without getting there, and all the postseason collapses they've had. Since 1995. They've been to the World Series twice, and they've been to the playoffs, I think, about 12 times since then, and have not won the World Series. And it was just a lot of relief, especially for, and I'm a huge Braves fan, but I'm not just a I'm not a Falcons fan, but for a lot of Atlanta people who are just a fan of all the Atlanta teams, after what happened with the Falcons a few years ago and blowing their lead. I mean, the city of Atlanta hadn't won a championship since the last time the Braves won in '95. So really that was a really big deal for the for the Braves to win that, and for the city and everything. And it's one of those things, of all teams to win it this year, with the amount of players and pieces that team lost throughout the season. It was pretty remarkable that of all years, for this to be the year the Braves were able to get it done after all those good teams could.
Yeah, and especially I sent the thing earlier that I found, which just made it feel a little bit better. And we'll break down each game of how it went here in a little bit. But just little touching thing that it stories in sports just kind of write themselves sometimes. And usually when you see a tragedy happen in some place, a team goes on a run because they're they're fueled by the city and they want to bring them together or whatever. For the Braves this year, they won 44 games before the All-Star break. They won 44 games after the All-Star break, and they won the World Series in the 44th week of 2021. And of course, the number 44 means so much to that Atlanta Braves organization because of Hank Aaron, who unfortunately passed away this year. But it's just like how that number 44, connects to everything the Braves had did this season. It makes the story even that much better.
Yeah, and one other 44, the executive of the year, most likely in the National League, was is probably gonna be Alex Anthopoulos, and he's 44 years old. So it's just another 44 on there. But it was really special for that to be the case. And it was really cool to see. And with the Braves, they had game 3 in Atlanta, which was the first home game for the Braves in the series. They had a really touching tribute to Hank Aaron, and his widow was there, Billy Aaron, on the field before the game, and they honored her. And the Braves all year have had number 44 cut into the outfield, and that was really cool that they were able to play the World Series and win. And obviously they didn't clinch at home, but to win the World Series with that number on the field, it was definitely a special thing for Braves fans, and for a lot of baseball people in general, because Hank Aaron meant a lot to everybody, and not just people in Atlanta. So he was a very important piece to for the Braves. And people are also forgetting that the Braves also lost Phil Niekro this year too. So obviously Hank Aaron was the bigger icon, but Phil Niekro was another big Atlanta Braves legend that was lost this year. So it was one of those things that was really cool to to kind of win it for them, for the Braves. But
Yeah, well, let's go ahead and jump into breaking this series down from Game 3 on. It was Game 3, first game in Atlanta. Game kind of started off; it was pretty decent. 0-0 through the first, 0-0 through the second. Held the Astros, didn't score in the third, and then Atlanta scored the first run in the bottom of the third inning.
yeah, Atlanta in that game able to manufacture a run. One thing that the Braves this season did was, they just hit home runs all year. I mean, they were just a home run. They were a slugging team. They were, I believe, third in the big leagues in home runs, um, and that was really important for the Braves. And of course, but sometimes in these World Series games against good pitching, um, it's tough off of off of home runs. And I think it was a big deal in that game for the Braves to be able to to manufacture that run in the bottom of the third. Um, I think Eddie Rosario and was a large part of that, and then Austin Riley got the hit, maybe, or
Yeah, it
I'm
was
not 100%.
Riley doubled down the third baseline.
Yeah, so that was a big deal in that game. And and then to support what was becoming a special outing for the Braves pitching staff.
Yeah, Ian Anderson started this game, and I think he got pulled after the fifth, but he had a no hitter through 5 innings of this. And I did they allow a hit? It was in the seventh is when they allowed their first hit
They allowed their first hit in the eighth inning.
in the eighth inning. Okay,
Um,
so it was
yeah, so it wasn't a perfect pitching. It wasn't a perfect outing by the pitchers. The Braves, Ian Anderson walked three guys. I think he also hit Correa with a breaking ball. So he was a little bit shaky. His pitch count was getting up there, so they pulled him in the fifth inning and put in AJ Minter, who pitched great. And then Luke Jackson pitched a clean inning. But then in the eighth inning, of all people to give up the no hitter was Tyler Matzik, but it was a pop up that dropped between Dansby Swanson and Eddie Rosario that really should have been caught, but I think, and it should have been caught by Rosario, but I think Dansby Swanson kind of ran out there and distracted him, and he wasn't sure if Dansby was gonna try to catch it. They didn't want to collide with him, and that's what kind of cost them the no hitter. But I believe it was the longest no hit bid in many years, maybe since like the early '60s or something. So which was pretty crazy against a team like the Astros. That was such a great offensive team.
yeah. And so like you said, Ledmus Diaz got that hit off of Matzik in the eighth, and then they got out of the rest of that inning. And then in the bottom of the eighth, Travis d'Arnaud gave the Braves another run with a home run off Kendall Graveman to center field, and pretty much just did lock that game away because the Astros had no offensive. Um, uh, what's the word I'm looking for? They had a no offensive game plan really in that game. They were just kind of swinging at everything. So they only got 2 hits that game. Braves ended up winning that one 2-0, taking a 2-1 lead in the series. And then we go to game 4 where the Astros get an early run right in the first inning.
Yeah, so game four was always going to be a bullpen game for the Braves. They had their top three lined up to start the series, and Charlie Morton, Max Fried, Ian Anderson. But then game four, you just didn't know what was going to happen. So the Braves, what they decided to do was to start a lefty in Dylan Lee and to bring in Kyle Wright, who is an embattled righty that has pitched in the big leagues a decent amount over the last couple years, but really struggled at times. And he's the guy who gave up the 10-run first inning last year to the Dodgers in the championship series, and he um it had really been a struggle for him. And in the big leagues this year, he was awful in his very minimal work he got this year. But he went back down to AAA and pitched pretty well for the second half of the season. Kind of kept getting better, made some adjustments. Kind of started throwing a new curveball and stuff, and it's looked a lot better. So he got pulled up when Charlie Morton went down with the injury. He was the guy that got the call up to be on the World Series roster. And boy, did it pay off, because Dylan Lee was all over the place in the first inning. I mean, I think he walked 2 guys, gave up a hit gave up a run early, only got 1 out. And then Kyle Wright came in and he just mowed him down.
Yeah, Kyle Wright looked really good in that in his game. So in his 4 2/3, he had, I think the only run he gave up was a home run to Altuve, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
He did have 3 strikeouts, 3 walks, but I mean, coming into that situation, especially after you had said his poor performance last year in the playoffs, not really pitching much in the major leagues this year, and to come in a big spot like that in the World Series game and give your team 4 2/3 innings of 1 run baseball, that's pretty huge, and then turn it over to that bullpen of Martin, Matzik, Jackson, and Smith to kind of help seal the deal off in this one.
Yeah, so that was such a big deal for Kyle Wright. And then the Astros were up 2-0, and um, the thing that the Braves did in this game that made I was really really happy with, and the reason they won the game is because instead of punting this game by putting in one of your long relievers when you're down by 2 runs late, the Braves said, okay, this is the World Series, this is a must-win game. we're going to throw our best guys. And, Chris Martin did come in and throw an inning who hadn't really been one of the Braves' best guys, but Tyler Matzik came in with a down by 2 runs. And that was something that showed to me that the Braves were really, really, really wanting this game. And it paid off because Tyler Matzik pitched a clean inning, and the Braves got a rally going with an RBI double from Austin Riley, and to get within 1 run. And then in the bottom of the seventh inning, they got a magical inning with a home run from off of Christian Javier, who had been pretty much untouchable in the postseason so far. um, Dansby Swanson hit an opposite field home run after really not looking good at all the whole series. He had completely lost at the plate, and then right after that, very next hitter, Jorge Soler, who we will we'll hear from some more, hit a hit a go ahead home run and on just a line shot to left field. So it was a very very big moment, of course, with the playing in Atlanta with the home crowd and everything. It was really really cool, and the place was absolutely insane atmosphere, and it was really fun to see. And it was funny, I actually wasn't able to watch this game. I was on my well until the very very end. I was on my way back. I was walking to my truck from the Auburn game, and uh, you could hear people yelling when Swanson hit his home run because people were still watching it at tailgates after the Auburn game. So thought that was pretty cool. Um, but yeah, Jorge Soler put the Braves in front, and then Luke Jackson and Will Smith came up big.
Yeah, so the Braves are able to finish that game off 3-2, take a 3-1 lead in the series, and set up a game at home for Game 5 again with a chance to clinch the series. And the game started really hot for the Atlanta Braves. They ended up getting a grand slam in the first inning from Adam Duvall. I believe it was I think Soler singled, Riley singled, and then Eddie Rosario walked. Adam Duvall hit a massive shot to right field. It was off the bat, I thought it was over the chop house even, but I think it came in front of that one. But the Astros fought back, and in the top of the second, they got a couple runs themselves.
Yeah, and this was a game that the Astros fought back. The Braves, this was the Charlie Morton game that they needed. Um, they were hoping that Charlie Morton would pitch Game 5 after pitching Game 1. And with his injury, that really hurt the Braves in this game because you were kind of down to a replacement, and the replacement ended up being Tucker Davidson, who had not pitched in the big league since June. Um, and for different reason from Kyle Wright, Tucker Davidson had battled a forearm injury for most of the season. He had just got back from it, so um, it was definitely a struggle for him. He did pitch a clean top of the first, but after that, the second inning and third inning were really a struggle. I was really surprised the Braves brought him back in the third inning after giving up 2 runs in the second inning. Um, but he really struggled and couldn't control the ball, couldn't throw strikes, and by the time he was out, and Jesse Chavez came in and cleaned up the third inning, but by the runs that were on base scored, and the Astros tied the game up at 4.
Yeah, so the Astros tied the game up in 4 right in the third. And then in the bottom of the third, the Braves come back and get a home run from Freddie Freeman. I believe, is that the one that was hit 480 feet or
Yes,
something like that?
it was 460, but I believe it was the longest home run hit in the World Series in the Statcast era,
Yeah,
if I'm not mistaken. It was
I
something like that.
I would believe it. It was a moonshot. Um, so the Braves took the lead again, 5-4 right there. And then in the top of the fifth is when the Astros kind of really got the game open. They got a single from Correa to start it off, and then Gurriel singled. They intentionally walked Bregman to load the bases, and then Martin Maldonado off of AJ Minter got a walk to bring in a run, and then Marwin Gonzalez singled to left field to give them 2 more runs.
Yeah, and this was a interesting. situation because AJ Minter had been incredible in the postseason, and sometimes and Martin Maldonado went to the plate and he wasn't even trying to get a hit. He was just trying to get on base with a walk or hit by pitch. He literally stood like basically right on top of the plate, as far as he could forward in the or to the toward the plate in the batter's box, without him being out of the batter's box, and basically trying to get hit by the pitch. And I think the first pitch that Minter threw was a little bit inside off the plate, and it almost hit him just because he was so close to the plate. And I think it might have freaked Minter out just a little bit, and he lost his command. And when he lost his command, he walked Maldonado. It's one of those things. I think it just kind of freaked him out. And then Marwin Gonzalez hit a good pitch, and he just hit a pop up into left field that dropped. It was just one of those uh, blooper hits. There wasn't really anything you could do about it if you were the Braves. He just got a kind of a lucky hit, um, but the Astros took the lead 7-5 in that sequence, and they held on to that lead the rest of the game. They added a couple more, which I was really disappointed in the Braves at the time because of the upcoming off day that they had on Monday. The Braves really punted this game. They put in Drew Smiley, who has really had a rough season, especially in the second half. They put Drew Smiley in to kind of mop up down by 2 runs, and it was almost like punting a 2-run game. But uh, where you could have possibly, gotten a bloop and a blast to tie the game up if you had kept it at a 2-run deficit with your top relievers coming in. But um, turns out it didn't matter in the end. But I thought this was a really poorly managed game from the Braves standpoint.
Well, yeah, especially after we were just talking about earlier in the series that they were down, or I think it was just the last game before this that they were down by 2 runs, and then they pitched their big three, and the Braves got right back in it and took the lead and won that game. So I guess for the back-to-back days that you don't really want to pitch them 3 days in a row, but you just did say they do have an off day the next day. But Smiley did give up 2 more runs in the seventh and the or one in the seventh, one in the eighth to give the Astros this game 9-5. And they had the off day Monday, and then Tuesday they were back in Houston for Game 6, and it was a pretty good game overall. If you're a Braves fan, if you're an Astros fan, not so much. But the big story of this game, I know the Braves are we're going to talk about how their offense, but it was Max Fried. He looked back to the Max Fried level that we have seen, the past couple years before he'd kind of struggled so far in the playoffs.
Yeah, so the thing about Max Fried, and remember I was watching the day of the game. I was scrolling through Twitter and I forgot who was interviewing him, but it was Matt Diaz, who's a former Brave, back in the late 2000s, and they were talking to him about Max Fried and what he expected, and he was talking about Max Fried tipping his pitches in Game 2. And basically, what he was doing, he picked up on it, and you could go back and watch it. And you could figure out he was basically flaring his glove different on his off speed than he was on his fastball. So you could call what pitch was coming because he was just he was flaring his glove different. He was tipping it. And basically, that's how the Astros were hitting some of those pitches because Max Fried's stuff in Game 2 looked incredible. I mean, his velocity was up, his slider was really good, his curveball was its normal shape, and then he was throwing, but he was getting hit off the plate. I mean, they were hitting the ball when it was a foot off the plate, consistently, and it was really it was really worrisome for the Braves, and you're wondering what was going on there. And after that second inning where he gave up 5 runs, he was dominant for the rest of that outing. The next 3 innings, he really didn't give up anything. So when you get back to Game 6, he had apparently he had figured out that pitch tip and to stop doing it. And then you kind of saw, the real Max Fried and what he can do. And what he can do is shut down any lineup in the big leagues at when he's on. I mean, he's really good. He's got 3 spectacular pitches, and then his changeup was really a key in that game on Tuesday. He was throwing his changeup a lot more than normal, and it looked good. So he's a guy that is really a potential, and he's still getting better and better. But he's really a guy that's a potential ace in the big leagues, and pitched a phenomenal Game 6.
Yeah, and I think we also even saw him, if I'm not mistaken, he hit his highest velocity he's ever hit in his career. What was it, 98 miles an hour or something like that? in this
Yeah,
game.
he hit 98.4
Yeah.
in the which was the fastest pitch of his career.
So there's that. But Max Fried looked really, really good. We'll jump over to the offense now because the offense really got started in the top of the third inning. It was 0-0 all the way up until it. Ozzy Albies got a single off of Luis Garcia to start the inning. Darno flied out. Swanson flied out. Eddie Rosario walked, so you had a guy on first and second with 2 outs, and then Jorge Soler comes and hits a 3-run home run off Luis Garcia.
Yeah, and that was just a great at bat by Soler. I think that the key to me in that sequence was that Ozzy Albies had struggled so much in the playoffs, and particularly in the World Series, and from the left side of the plate, and they moved him down the lineup, kind of, you know, was really upset with the way that he was approaching things at the plate. And he settled down and he was more patient and he was able to line a two-strike pitch with a much better approach than he had been having into right center field for a base hit. And that's really where that got started, because once they got back around to Rosario had a really good at bat, drew a walk, and you get to Jorge Soler, who's been who's been really hot, um, and he just put up a great at bat. Fouled off a bunch of pitches. And then eventually, if you foul off enough sliders, and then they keep throwing sliders and they hang one, I mean, there's nobody I'd rather have at the plate against a hanging breaking ball after seeing 3 or 4 of them than Jorge Soler. That guy is just as powerful as they get, and he hit it out of the not just over the wall, but out of the ballpark. I mean, it was an absolute missile.
And it was one of the biggest pimp jobs of all time as well. That because that was pretty awesome the way he threw the
Yeah,
bat
he
and turned
was.
around to the
Yeah, he
dugout.
was. He knew it, and it was it was one of those that it was a great moment for the Braves and for Jorge Soler, and it was one of those kind of back-breaking moments in a postseason game, because playing in Houston, the crowd is just absolutely going crazy with 2 outs. You get them to a two-strike count, and it's one of those moments where they see all the towels waving and everything, and then it's just silent from the Astros crowd in Houston, and it's one of those moments that can really affect a big postseason game like that, more so than you would see in maybe a regular season game.
Yeah, it really is. Take that away crowd out of it, and they're it'll really hurt the team. But the big I think the big blows to that is the Astros had already came back in the series from four nothing before, just a couple games before this, or I think it was the game before this actually. So
Yeah, it was.
they I think the big inning for the Braves, at least in this series, or this game, was the fifth inning when I think it was Swanson hit a home run off Christian Javier again, that scored Ozzy Albies, and then they brought in Blake Taylor to try and clean up that inning, and he ended up giving up a home run to Freddie, or a double to Freddie Freeman, sorry, to score Jorge Soler, and that really gave the Braves that 6-0 lead in the fifth inning. It kind of took everything out of it, and then the one just to cap everything off, which I think is the kind of feel good moment, is Freddie Freeman in the seventh hit a solo home run. At that point, I think everyone kind of knows that it's most likely over, and then just the look that Freeman has rounding the bases with his family. He says he sees them jumping up and down, and the smile that he has on his face. That had to be one of the coolest moments, at least for you as a Braves fan, and everything that Freddie Freeman means to that team to see in that moment.
Yeah, it was so cool. And one thing is, for whatever reason, Freddie Freeman's been scrutinized um, about his ability to hit in the postseason, and this year he really came through, and mainly in getting that clutch hit. And he got that clutch hit in the series against the Brewers. And outside of the first 2 games of the Dodgers series, Freddie Freeman was absolutely on fire in the postseason. And um, last night, or Tuesday night, he that was such a big deal for him, and to be able to hit that home run. And it was really the dagger, because even in a 6-0 game, the Braves, as a Braves fan, after all the collapses and postseason trauma, and especially against an offense as explosive as the Astros, you're still nervous, But then when Freddie hit the home run, you were just like, this is, you really, it really felt felt a lot better. It felt good. You felt good about it at 7-0. So, it was a great, a great game for the Braves. You know, I grew up a Braves fan, and I live in Alabama, and I don't think too many people understand how large the Braves, not it just geographically, not necessarily in population, but just geographically how large the Braves fan base is, because of really the Braves are the only team in the South, and up until the 90s, when the Marlins and the Rays were put in, were created in Florida. um, the Braves were kind of the team of the Southeast for forever, and that home run and just that game meant so much to a lot of people, in the Southeast. It was really cool. So
Yeah, and you can really hear that in like Dansby Swanson's voice after the series is over. He's a kid who had, grew up right close to Atlanta. Grew up a Braves fan, and then to play there his entire career. He kind of was breaking down emotional that what it meant to not just the team but to the fan base and to Atlanta itself after all the heartbreaks you had talked about through all their sports teams. Um, so it was good to see that. Congratulations to you for the Braves. Winning their first World Series in a long time, and now we get to move on to kind of looking what the season overall looked like in the game of baseball and kind of what we're looking forward to in this off season.
yeah, so just to start off this season, I think this season was fantastic for baseball, because um, for one thing, that baseball really led the way to fans getting back in the stands after the not to say after the coronavirus pandemic, because it still is ongoing, but it really kind of led the charge in getting fans back into the stands, and being able to live with that and have fans in the stands. And that started early in the season. You had the Rangers with their full crowd in the opening weekend, and then other teams started to follow suit early on, and eventually everybody, except I don't know if the Blue Jays ever got back to full capacity. I think they did, but I'm not sure. Um, but of course that being a little different because they're in Canada and they have different rules, but um, it was so important, and I think there was a lot of good things done in baseball this year. I think that you kind of look at um, some of the moments. You look at the Field of Dreams game, was a really big deal for baseball, because there really was a much bigger regular season game than we've had in a long time. Nobody really had watched, or nobody really paid it that much attention to a lot of big national broadcasts in the regular season, and that was one that a lot of people watched. You had and it was obviously a great game as well. The postseason drew enormous TV ratings, which was really cool to see, because I think that last year people were a little bit upset with the TV ratings that were drawn by baseball, because people weren't out and about doing a lot of things last year, with kind of being stuck at home with the pandemic, and it was tough because a lot of what you could do was just watch sports, and nobody was really watching it, and people were really kind of upset about it. And I think that's something that really turned around this year. I think they said the TV numbers were up 10 to 15% in the postseason, which is really, really, really great. And that being, I think some of it was over 2019 as well. But it was a really fun season of baseball. We saw a record number of no hitters, which was interesting. I think that there was some good dialogue on the rule changes and stuff that possibly to come. Um, some of the bad things that you hated to see, as many injuries as we saw this year. A lot of star players got hurt. Ronald Acuna Jr. missing most of the season. Mike Trout missed most of the season. You had a couple of the Dodgers stars injured for a lot of the season. Um, it wasn't good to see so many players get hurt. Steven Strasburg's another guy, injured for most of the season. So um, that kind of sucked to see. But overall, I think this was a great year for baseball, and I think that if the correct moves are made, especially with the upcoming collective bargaining agreement, hopefully that gets done quick, because I think baseball is building a little bit of momentum going forward. And I think the biggest thing going forward is the marketing of the sport, and for the players and the players and the um, and the owners to agree and not get in each other's way of this of the future of baseball, because I think that after the little bit of the momentum that's gained this year, if you start have a work stoppage and you miss the start of next year, that's going to take all the good stuff that happened in baseball this year and throw it out the window. So hopefully that we come to an agreement pretty early, and I'm really excited with how this season went. Obviously, as a Braves fan, it was a great story to have the Braves win with the way that the season went for them, and um, I couldn't be more excited about that. But good year for baseball in general.
Yeah, it really was a real bounce back year for baseball. Like you said, a lot of the numbers with being down, and just the everything that kind of had happened last year. With a lot of fans were upset with the way the expanded playoffs were going, and a bunch of stuff just last year didn't feel right to a lot of people. It wasn't a normal season. Even with the 60 games and the dispute between the players and the commissioner and then the owners of how many games you were going to get and how many wanting to push stuff back, and at times even thinking that the season was going to be canceled. To come back this year, be able to have a full 162 game season, to have like a normal playoff system back where it's the one wild card game like they all want. It's the all the drama you can have. The stands are packed again, and to have that back to normal per se, it just it was like a healing moment for everybody. And you can't go into having that one season after 2020 coming back 2021 being so strong and then have a work stoppage at the end of 20 or, at the end of 2021 looking to 2022. So it's very vital that they get a deal done really soon. Like you said, there's talks that if it's not within the next month they could have a labor strike and stuff. But we'll talk about that more as that happens. But like you said, it was an amazing season. It returned to normal for everybody. It sucked that so many injuries happened, but we kind of expected that, honestly, coming into the year. Everybody said going from 60 games back to 162 games every single day, it was going to cause more soft tissue injuries. It was going to cause more arm issues for pitchers. Um, and then we had the crackdown on the sticky substances or whatever that, might be attributing itself to more arm issues for pitchers. It was, we've heard with Tyler Glass now saying that was a case with his injury. But overall, it was a really, really great season for baseball in general. The numbers are back, there's momentum, and they just have to make sure that they keep making the right changes and that we don't get into some, who's the bigger man scenario this offseason between the players and the commissioner and owners.
Yeah, no doubt. And going forward into the off season, we're gonna have some really exciting stuff going on. Big free agent class, and several pretty high profile players possibly being on the kind of on the trading block. And it's going to be a very interesting and wild offseason, especially with all the shortstops in this year's class with Baez, Correa, Seager, and
Story,
Story and
Simeon.
others, Simeon. Yeah, there's so many good shortstops in this year's class, and it's going to be really interesting to see how that shakes out. And then obviously you got other guys. You got Freddie Freeman, who I think most people are expecting to return to the Braves, but it's not a sure thing. He's currently a free agent right now, and you got so many: Kenley Jansen, Clayton Kershaw, Max Scherzer. Um, just there's just so many top high profile free agents, and you hope that this year, that work stoppage and stuff doesn't kill the free agent class um, and really hurt things. But definitely going to be a very interesting offseason. I'm sure we'll preview it here at some point in the next week or two, and with one of our next episodes, and we'll definitely have some. We're going to have some awards at some point that we'll be talking about, and some of those deadlines are coming up soon. I mean, you got the non-tender deadline, I believe, is what, December 2nd. Um, and then you've got we got the options and the qualifying offer deadlines here in the next week. So definitely very, very, very interesting to look at. You might also see some free agents sign early. But very exciting season for Major League Baseball, and hopefully things go smoothly in the off season with the CBA, and we'll get right back to it here in just a few months.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked at all to see some players sign early to just get that out of the way and not have to worry about if there is a lockout, and then whenever that lockout comes back, trying to find a deal before spring training. So I wouldn't actually be surprised that if we had a quick moving free agent market right away. Um, but also we have a name change that's happening. So now the Indians are now officially the Cleveland Guardians. So that's going to be something we're going to have to get used to. But like you said, qualifying offer deadline Sunday. I believe, and the option deadline's the next couple days. So we'll have a ton of information to fill you guys in on next week, and we'll get on a more consistent uploading schedule. I know we've been bouncing between Tuesdays and Wednesdays and Thursdays and Mondays some days, so we'll get back on our normal schedule of Tuesdays. It's just with the postseason and both of us having teams that are going deep in the postseason. We want to be able to watch those games and watch as many games as we can and bring you guys enough information up to date. But we'll get on a more consistent schedule for that for sure. But you got anything else you want to wrap up on real quick?
Don't think so. Just obviously thrilled for the way that the season turned out for my Braves, and super exciting, and hopefully they're up there for years to come. They should have a really good opportunity to return here in the next few years, and I think it's very just very exciting for me, and for my fellow Braves fans. I'm I think it's it's just so cool to be in this, be in the position of being the World Series champions at the end of the season. So
We get it. The Braves won, Matt. I'm
hey,
just messing with
I
you.
hey, I could be gloating worse than I have been. So
But all right. Well, thank you guys for tuning into this episode of the Bat Flip Podcast, and we'll catch you guys next week.